Change is hard, not because you're doing it wrong, but because it asks something of you. Welcome to Change is Hard, a podcast from the Leadership Lab. I'm Audrey Blair, and this is a space for leaders who are learning how to sit with uncertainty, make decisions without rushing, and grow without losing themselves in the process. We'll talk about the moments that stretch you, the conversations you keep avoiding, and the quiet shifts that change everything. No noise, no pressure, just honest conversations about becoming the kind of leader and human you actually want to be. Let's get into it. Hey there, welcome in. Thanks for being here. I think it's going to be a quick one because I just wanted to share something. I just learned a new acronym, and I'm sure I'm late to the party. I often am. I just was reading an article. Actually didn't read an article. I saw a headline and it said something about blah, 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 JOMO. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what that is, but I bet it's the joy of missing out, kind of the opposite of FOMO. And I just had so many thoughts about it. So I wanted to jump on and share it with you. I didn't even read the article because I didn't want to be influenced by whatever it said. I don't know what they were going to say or what the author had to say about it, but I think it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And I'll explain to you why and how it is tied to leadership. Actually, I intentionally did it just recently, unknowingly, just the other night. Last week I was traveling and it was coming home was a little bit stressful. My flight was delayed. You know how that happens so often now. By the way, it happened because a flight attendant didn't show up for work. Have you ever had that experience before? That was my first time having that reason as a delay. So they're scrambling, trying to find someone to fill her spot. We get out, I get home a little bit late. So Saturday, I just needed a reset day. We got invited to go to something later that evening, and my husband comes over to me. He's like, hey, it's about ready to go. Are you wanting to go? And in that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, no, I don't want to go. Part of me did feel like I should go, one, because of the invitation, but also it's going to be a good time. There's going to be some live music. There's something I'm going to miss out on. I hadn't really hung out with this friend for a while. But at the end of the day, I thought, I'm just not prepared. I'm not ready. It's not a good place for me to be. And so I ended up declining, which after that initial maybe letting someone down, it was very freeing. My husband he went for a little while, had a great time. It was his buddy that invited us, and it was good because they got to go and hang out. And so it was really cool. But I come back to thinking about how often things show up maybe on your calendar. And I know this happens, that you will do or attend or go to a meeting. I'll use it in the context of a meeting that you will go to that you probably don't even need to be there. And I was thinking about the time I was working with a team, and I asked the question, we were talking about time and how everyone was so busy and how they had so little time. And we were breaking that down. And I asked the question, how many of you are attending meetings that you probably don't even need to go to, especially after the meeting, and you realize, oh my gosh, I totally could have skipped that. Just about everybody's hand went up. So I said, what's going on? Why are you doing that? And there were a lot of reasons that came up, and I'll talk a little bit about them here in just a minute. But someone raised their hand and they dropped a summary of all of those things, and they said FOMO. And they said, I'm afraid that I'm going to miss out on something. And I thought, you know what, that is really good awareness, is good insight. But then we had to dig into, what is it that you think you're missing out on? And I want to talk a little bit about that today, because FOMO can often be dressed up as engagement or commitment. Sometimes it can be dressed up as a leadership responsibility. I have to be there. But what I think, though, a lot of times it's based in fear. Literally, it's in the name. Fear of missing out, or fear of missing information, fear of losing influence, fear of not being seen. That was one of the reasons. Well, if I'm not there, right, then somehow your influence or your value decreases because you're not there to show face. On the flip side, JOMO, the joy of missing out, it's not about being checked out. That's not what I'm talking about here. And it's about being clear. More importantly, though, I think it's the freedom that comes from knowing where your presence matters, where it does not, and where your absence might actually be better leadership for you, for your team, for others that are involved. So forget FOMO. I think JOMO is where it's at. And yes, I know JOMO sounds like something that belongs on a coffee mug and, next to good vibes only and all of that. But that's not what I'm talking about here. Just hang out with me for just a moment. In leadership, FOMO is not always about missing the party, the dinner, the gossip, or the big announcement. It looks like joining a meeting, as I said, you know that you don't need to be in, particularly when you are in the optional line, those meetings where there's lots of people in there. Half of you don't even know why you need to be there. You're not sure what the intention of the meeting is. But even more importantly, there are meetings that you do know what's going on, and you still maybe need to rethink whether or not you have to be there. Sometimes it looks like staying attached to other work that no longer belongs to you. Sometimes it can look like keeping yourself copied on everything because you want to stay close. Have you done that, or your boss just keep me informed? I want to stay close to the situation. Or maybe it looks like, and I love this one, I'll join the meeting and I'll just listen in. I've got other work that I'm doing, and you think that you're multitasking. But really deep down, you know what you're doing is not listening, you're monitoring. You're monitoring for what's going on. Your ears are perked for listening to certain things. You want to make sure certain things are said or not said. And that is very different, because FOMO is often the fear that something important will happen without you. But underneath that, there's usually another fear. If I'm not there, I can lose influence. If I'm not there, I won't be represented, or my team won't be represented, or I won't be able to say my piece, or I won't be able to give my opinion. If I'm not there, they might get it wrong. That's a great one. They might forget the value that I bring. Or if I'm not there, I may not matter as much as I thought I did, because decisions are being made without me. That's not always a bad thing. But this is why FOMO is so sneaky, because it doesn't announce itself as fear. It shows up sounding very, responsible. I just want to stay informed. I want to make sure the right people's perspective is included. What's another good one? I don't want the team to go off track. I should probably be there just in case. But I got to tell you, and you know this, just in case is not a leadership strategy. So, one of the biggest places that FOMO shows up is on the calendar. Join those meetings. You don't need to be there because of maybe you're afraid of missing some context. But then the cost to you is that you miss your own thinking time. You miss the space you need to prepare, or something else that needs your attention more fully. You miss the space about being fully thorough or thinking things through. Perhaps you miss the space to lead instead of react. And if you are in every meeting, you are not necessarily more influential. You're just more tired. You're just everywhere all at once. Your presence doesn't automatically mean equal value. Sometimes giving up and allowing others to share some of that space is more important. It's the question you asked maybe before the meeting. It's the decision you empower someone else to make. It's also you saying, I don't need to be there, but here's what I need to know afterward. I also think that sometimes as leaders, you forget that your weight in the room can overshadow other people in the room. And I'm not saying that's your fault or your responsibility fully, but I do think that there is a different awareness that it can come across as though someone else's voice or view may not be shared. Now, we fall for it because it feels safer to be included rather than, you being very intentional about it. Because when you're included, there's a proof there's a validation, there's a relevance that can be felt and seen. But honestly, if you have to be in every meeting, or if you need every meeting invitation to confirm these things for you, it's just your calendar just becomes a mess, and it's not a good one. And the question really isn't so much, should I attend this meeting? The question is more about, what am I afraid will happen if I do not? That's the bigger question. That's the better question to ask. Can I not be there? And if I'm afraid to not go or to decline, what's the reason for that? What do I think is going to happen? What do I think is going to go off the rails? And that will give you more insight on, is it you're not trusting your team? What's going on there? You can have a deeper question about what is it that you are actually afraid will happen. Now, on the other hand, the joy of missing out is slightly different. In leadership, I want to think about it as the confidence to be absent from what doesn't require you to be there so that you can be fully present when you need to be. It's not the same as being disengaged or avoiding, or it's certainly not arrogant. Think of it more as wisdom and discernment. Think about it as knowing that your leadership is not measured, and hopefully not measured, by how many rooms and meetings you sit in. It's not about how many threads you're copied on or how many decisions you personally touch, because if every decision needs to have your personal touch, that's another issue. You want to turn it so that it's measured more by you creating clarity, you building ownership and responsibility for other people, and the outcomes that you help to make possible by not always being in the room. And I think that gives you freedom. It gives you that freedom to think and focus and let other people lead, where you don't have to hover. And then you can trust the systems and the people and the decisions you say that you want to trust. Often, when I ask leaders about what kind of leader that they want to be, trusted and trusting are two that often come up. And this is where you can show a little bit of that. And as I mentioned, it also gives other people the room. Sometimes your constant presence is not necessarily support. Sometimes it becomes a shadow. And again, I don't mean that in a negative way, and I certainly don't think that that is the intention. I was talking to this with a leader once, and they were saying something off the cuff, and someone took it in the wrong way. And I said, I think you're misunderstanding that when you say something, it has a lot more weight and heft than what you think. And they were taken a little bit back by that, because they had grown up in this company. They started out, at the bottom, and they worked themselves all the way up. But the realization that they're not one of the boys anymore because of their role, it's just something sometimes you have to pay attention to a little bit more. And that can be hard, that can be challenging, but it's the reality as you continue to think about what you're leading, what you're responsible for, how much of your decisions impact other people. Thinking about giving space for someone else to make some of these decisions or to have their voice being heard. Now, practically, when you think about that next meeting, what is the intention? Is it very clear why you need to be there? Are you giving information, receiving information? Consider the cost of attending, and or what would happen if you did not attend. And I guarantee you, if this is something that's already on the fence and you're not sure, probably the cost of you not attending is very little, because you can get an update. Is someone else already there that can represent you or the team? Can you ask for information afterwards? Sometimes it doesn't require that you absolutely have to be there. So give it a think. As you are going about this week, FOMO says, you better be there just in case. JOMO says, I know where I'm needed and I know where I'm not. That is also leadership. It's not being everywhere, doing everything, and thinking your value is only seen through your availability. Sometimes, and you know this, the most powerful leadership move is declining a meeting and closing the laptop, letting someone else own the room, trusting that your value doesn't change because, you're not there. Because people also feel like, well, what if I don't show up, and they think, well, I'm not committed. But on the other side, there's someone else sitting in that meeting thinking, I don't need to be here. And that person declined. And I'm encouraged by that because now that gives me the freedom and the flexibility to not show up at something that is really not useful for me on my calendar. Maybe it's a meeting, maybe it's something else. If you're being pulled to go out of fear of missing out on something, figure out another way to get that information and figure out a better use of your time. All right, I'm dropping off. I'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, if something in this episode resonated, I want you to know you don't have to navigate it alone. This is the work we do inside the Leadership Lab, building capacity, strengthening decision-making, and learning how to lead with intention through change. If you're curious about working together, you'll find more information in the show notes. I'm glad you were here. I'll see you next time.